Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. In another episode of the 5 paint challenge, using just Abaddon Black, White Scar, Averland Sunset, Mephiston Red and Leadbelcher, I'm going to paint this Chaos Space Marine in the style of the Iron Warriors. So the first thing I've done is I've primed the model black, because this will give us a nice, smooth, even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. And first of all, I'm coming in with Leadbelcher. With this, I'm going to paint all over the Chaos Space Marine. This is going to give us that metallic armour look that's so iconic of Iron Warriors. So in a couple of thin layers, I'm just building up the Leadbelcher all over the Chaos Space Marine. Doesn't matter if we get this over areas that aren't going to be silver later on, it's just good to get a nice solid base coat of Leadbelcher all over the model. So working a few smooth layers, slowly building up to a solid coat of Leadbelcher all over the Chaos Space Marine, making sure you work it into all of the recesses so there isn't any of the black primer showing and we've got a solid base coat all over our model. And after a couple of layers, you can see I've got a solid coat of Leadbelcher all over the miniature. So the next thing I'm going to do is paint any of the trim on the model. For this, I'm mixing Leadbelcher with Averland Sunset. It's just shy of a 50-50 mix between the two. I'm mixing the two colours together to create a sort of goldy colour for the armour trim. This is because I'm not using Retributor armour in this set of 5 paints, so I've got to make my own sort of goldy colour. This isn't perfect, but it does give the impression of a gold or brass trim, so it will do the job for a 5 paint challenge. So with this mix, I'm just very carefully picking out all of the parts of trim and detailing on the model. It's probably going to take a couple of coats to get solid coverage, but just make sure you pick out all of these details with a couple of layers of this Leadbelcher Averland Sunset mix. I'm trying to be nice and neat around the areas that I want to remain Leadbelcher, but if I do make any mistakes, it's easy to tidy back up with a bit of Leadbelcher afterwards. So I'm just working my way around the model, picking out all of the trim with a couple of layers of this mix. This will work really well with the silver armour to give the impression of golden trim. Because we did mix the yellow with metallic paint, it is going to have that sheen and shine that you get from metallics. It's just not quite as bright of a colour as if I'd used a pure metallic paint. So there are a lot of details and parts of trim, so really take your time, work your way around the model, pick all of these out with a bit of this mix. And after I've picked out all of those trim details, you can see it's really added interest to the model. It's got a slight gold appearance to all of that trim. So now it's time to shade everything we've painted so far. For this I'll be using Abaddon Black. So I'm going to apply some of this to my palette, and I'm just going to start thinning it down with loads of water. I don't want this to be too strong and too black. I do just want to water it down so it flows really smoothly and loses some of its intensity. So I'm just going to be applying this as an all-over shade. So once I've watered that Abaddon Black down enough, I'm just applying it all over the model. This way it's going to sink into all of the recesses, add definition, as well as darkening down that armour and all of that trim. It's really going to give our model some depth and definition all over it. Obviously you don't want this to pull too heavily. If you do notice it's pulling in any areas, you can wick it away with a dry brush, but make sure you apply some of this watered down Abaddon Black all over the model. And once it's dried, you can see how it's sunk into all of those recesses, given some definition to the model and darkened down all of the armour and the trim. So now it's time to highlight all of these areas. For this, I'll be using Leadbelcher, and I'm going to dry brush this onto the model. So I'm working that Leadbelcher paint into the bristles of my brush, working it off on a bit of paper towel. So I've only got a little bit of paint left on the brush. And then we're going to start dry brushing all over the miniature. So with just a little bit left in the brush, I can just very quickly and very lightly run my brush back and forwards over the model. This is going to pick out all of the raised details, put a little bit of pure Leadbelcher onto the edges, all the details, all of the trim and everything like that. And just give the impression of light catching these areas, as well as on those areas we painted with the silver gold mix. It's also going to give it the impression of shining metal. So you don't want to be too heavy. You just want to make sure you dry brush all over the model. And as you can see, once that dry brush is complete, it's picked out all of the edges, brightened them up, and given the impression of light catching on the sharper edges. So next I'm coming in with some Abaddon Black. I'm going to paint a lot of the details on the model. So I'm picking out all of the things like the undersuit. So all of these ridged areas you can see here between all the armour panels, I'm picking all of these out with Abaddon Black. I'm also picking out any of the cables on the model. So he's got these ones here on his helmet. There are other cables dotted around. This one here has also got this skull on the back. So I'm picking out the horns with some Abaddon Black as well. Obviously being really careful around all the areas we've already painted and highlighted. Make sure I pick out any details that I want to be black with a couple of layers of Abaddon Black. So as well as the undersuit, cables, horns, things like this, just any bits of detailing that you want to make stand out. I'm also going to paint the pouch and the straps and all of these details with some Abaddon Black as well. Still being really careful around all the other details, just catching these areas with some Abaddon Black. Same as there's some grenades hanging from his belt as well. I'm going to make sure I catch all of these details with some black. I'm also picking out the inside of the shoulder pad trim. Obviously being really careful around the gold trim we've got. Just picking out that inside part with some black as well. And the casing to his gun. So on the bolt pistol in his hand here, I'm picking this out with some Abaddon Black, being careful around the symbol in the middle. I want to leave that silver, but just catch all of the casing with some black. And I'm going to pick out this part to his chainsword as well. As this is an Iron Warrior, we'll be coming back in later, doing some very iconic Iron Warrior work on here, but for now I just want it to be black. I was picking out any of the other horn details and the handles as well, just everything that I want to be black. I'm making sure I pick it out now with a couple of layers of Abaddon Black. And with all of those black details applied, you can see we've added a lot of interest, picked out a lot of details on the model. So next up, we're going to pick out the cloth on the miniature. For this, I'll be using Mephiston Red. Just going to carefully pick out any areas of fabric. So this one's just this part hanging down from his waist. I'm just going to carefully make sure I paint all of this with a couple of layers of Mephiston Red. So being really careful, once again around all the other details we've already painted, just catching the cloth with some Mephiston Red. And with that cloth picked out, we can now shade the fabric. For that, I'll be using my Abaddon Black and water mix from before. So if it's still wet, you can use the one you made before. If not, make up another Abaddon Black shade. And I'm just applying this all over the areas I just painted with Mephiston Red.
If you enjoyed the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below.
And once that shade has dried on the fabric, you can see it's added detail to the cloth. And now it's time to start highlighting all the other details on the model. So with some Abaddon Black and White Scar, I'm going to make a grey mix, about the colour of Mechanica Standard Grey. I'm mixing the two colours together on my palette till I get a nice grey I'm happy with. I'm going to highlight all of the details I just painted black. So for the undersuit, I'm just going to very carefully pick out the tops of all the ridges to the undersuit. Just trying to catch the tops of all the raised parts with a thin line of this grey mix. Try and keep these lines as small as you can and just pick out the very tops of all of those ridges to the undersuit. I'm going to apply it as an edge highlight to the gun holster on his waist. For the sharp points, I'm using the side of my brush to get a nice thin, even line. Other parts, I'll use the tip. Just try and get a nice thin edge highlight of this grey mix on the holster, as well as on any of the straps as well. I'm just catching all of these with a bit of this grey mix. And on the pipes, wherever they've got a ridged bit of detail here, much like with the undersuit, I'm just catching the very tops with a thin edge highlight of this grey. Doing the same on the horns here on this backpack, where they've got these raised ridges on them. I'm just catching the very tops with a small edge highlight of this grey mix. I'm doing the same for the casing to his bolt pistol as well. I'm just catching the very edges of that casing with a really thin edge highlight of grey. And I'll do the same on the chainsword as well, just catching the very edge with a highlight of grey. And with all of the black details highlighted, it's really made those areas on the model stand out. So next I'm going to paint the eyes and the cloth. For this I'll be using Mephiston Red. And first of all, I'm going to just carefully sink some of this into the recesses for his eye lenses. Obviously being really careful around the silver and gold details. Just getting the eye lenses with a little bit of Mephiston Red. And I'm also going to apply this to the fabric as well. So wherever the shade we applied has settled in a recess, I'm leaving the shade in the darkened down recess, but I'm bringing the rest of the fabric back up to a brighter Mephiston Red colour. Push that contrast that we got from the shade, really make the fabric look like it's got some depth. With the red applied until we've brightened up the fabric and we've picked out the eyes. So now I'm coming in with a mix of Mephiston Red and White Scar. I'm mixing the two colours together on my palette. The problem with mixing white and red is you get a pink colour, which isn't ideal, but it will do for what we're trying to highlight here. So using this, I'm picking out very raised edges of the fabric. So wherever we've got a sharp point, the edge of a fold, tops of creases, things like that, I'm just picking these areas out with a really thin edge highlight of this red and white mix. Keeping these lines nice and thin. Don't want the fabric to read as pink. Just give the impression of light catching on the sharpest and most raised details. And with the fabric highlighted, the next thing I'm going to work on is finishing the eyes. For that, it will be a Mephiston Red and Averland Sunset mix. Once again, mixing the two colours together on my palette. A little bit more red than yellow in this mix. This will just create a slightly brighter red colour, but not pushing it to pink. For this, I'm just painting a thin line of this mix at the very bottom of each of the eye lenses. I'm just very carefully painting a thin line at the very bottom of each eye. With that highlight applied to the eyes, there's just one final step left to apply to the eyes, and that's going to be with some white scar. Just going to add a small dot of white in the very back corner. This gives the impression of light reflecting in the eye lenses and really adds a great focal point to these models. And with the eyes painted, there's only really one detail left to paint on this Iron Warrior, and that's going to be the iconic hazard markings on his chainsword. So first of all, for this, I'm coming in with Averland Sunset. I'm going to pick out the areas that I want to be the hazard markings. So I'm working out how far apart I want them to be and how wide, and I'm just painting a vertical line of Averland Sunset over the black to mark out where the stripes will be. By doing it this way, if you're not happy with the placement, it's really easy to come back in with black, keep cutting back and forth with the two colours till you're happy with where you want your hazard stripes to be. So I'm just marking out where I want them to be on the model with the Averland Sunset. This is really great for working out the spacings. And then once I'm happy with the spacing, I'm carrying the line over the top. Again, these lines don't need to be neat. Any mistakes can easily be tidied back up with black afterwards. Just want to mark out where the stripes are going to be. And then obviously you'll carry them down onto the other side. So you've got some yellow stripes going across the model. And then I'm just coming back in with a small brush and filling in the middle of all of the hazard stripes. Once again, any mistakes you can just tidy back up with black, but fill in between all of the lines we just painted with some Averland Sunset, so we get nice, straight, tidy hazard stripes on the chainsword. If you want, you can add these to more areas of the model. You can paint any panel black and add some hazard stripes. There's never a way about putting them on the wrong place on an Iron Warriors, but sometimes less is more. So I'm just applying these ones to the chainsword. But just make sure you take your time, keep these nice and neat. Just fill in the lines we painted earlier with some Averland Sunset till we get solid hazard stripes going down the length of the chainsword. After we filled in all of those lines, we've got solid hazard stripes going across the chainsword. It's really giving it that 40k Iron Warriors look. So now with some Averland Sunset and White Scar, I'm mixing the two colours together to create a brighter yellow. For this, I'm just going to apply an edge highlight on the tops of the lines we just painted. So I'm just going to very carefully pick out where the yellow is, thin edge highlight, just to give the impression of a sharp edge where those hazard stripes are. This ties in with the highlight we gave with the grey earlier, gives a consistent look, like light catching that sharp edge on the chainsword. And with those hazard stripes painted, that is everything on the Iron Warriors Chaos Space Marine painted, but we do have to tidy up the base. So for this, I'll be using Abaddon Black. I'm just going to apply a couple of layers of Abaddon Black all over the base. As always, being careful around the feet. I don't want to get any black over the feet we've already painted. I'm just going to make sure I cover all of the base and the rim with a couple of layers of Abaddon Black. It's going to tidy up that base, get rid of all the overspill of paint, just give a nice clean finished look to the model. Obviously, if you're not just using 5 paints, base your models how you normally would, but for this challenge, a solid black base will do. And with the base painted, That is how to paint an Iron Warriors Chaos Space Marine using just 5 paints. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know in the comments down below what other Chaos Legions would you like to see me tackle with just 5 paints. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And also a shout out to our channel member Jenkins. Thank you so much for the support. It's great to have you on board, and happy painting.